live and also on Zoom. Just want to welcome everybody. We'll get started here. Coach, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, hi, everybody. Welcome to USA Hockey webinar series presented by BioSteel and Pure Hockey. We're really excited to have Coach Nate Leaman on. He's our U.S. World Junior Team head coach for 2021, as well as Providence College's current head coach. So just want to welcome everybody and remind everybody, if you are on either platform, YouTube or Zoom, to put in some questions in the Q&A box on Zoom and then on the chat during the YouTube live. So I'll be making sure to keep tabs of that. And we're really excited to have Coach on today and talk about building teams. And from his experiences, he grew up in essentially Dayton, Ohio, Kettering, Centerville, Ohio, and you got a late start to hockey. Can you talk about kind of your start to hockey and how that all progressed?
Ohio was very much a soccer and football area. It wasn't a hockey area when I was growing up. I graduated high school in '91, so a ways back. But when I was always a soccer player, I had kind of gotten to a point where I maybe got a little burnt out on soccer, and I had a friend on my soccer team that kept coming to me for about a year and a half. You should try hockey. You should play hockey. You should play hockey. And as soon as I did, I just fell in love with it. So I didn't start playing hockey till I was somewhere between 13 and 14. And fortunately, really fortunately for me, hockey was bad in Ohio, and someone could pick up the game at 13 and 14, get into youth hockey, get on some type of travel team, find a way to make a high school team. And I ended up working at a rink, working at the town rink, and basically just became an absolute rink rat, and picked up the game and kept playing and playing and playing. I think there's some big advantages to picking the game up late. Like, I think you can, at that age, or maybe when we talk about youth hockey later, but when at that age, you can really learn a stride. You can learn the stride the right way. When you're trying to teach 6, 7, 8-year-olds stride, sometimes they just look at you with 3 heads. But so there are some advantages too of learning the game late, but it was great. And you could use kind of the IQ that you had with soccer on give and go and offensive instincts and things, and translate that to hockey.
Yeah. So you played in Indy a little bit, travel, and then you went over to Sweden and then to your way to SUNY Cortland. How was that path, and how did that all take place?
It was, again, it was different. First of all, I was looked at for being crazy for playing junior hockey after high school. All my friends in Ohio were going right to college. So I remember going over to friends' houses after we graduated. And, what are you doing next year? Well, I'm going to go play junior hockey in Indianapolis. And, people just kind of look at you like, what, you're not going to college? And so it was a different path, but I was fortunate. I had a great coach in Indianapolis by the name of Mark Tabram that works for USA Hockey now. I think he really instilled a lot in our group, about learning how to compete. It was the first time I really learned what compete was. And I'm very thankful to Mark for that. And, and fortunately, I was able to kind of keep going up and developing and finding a way to get to a Division III school. And, I loved Cortland. It was the best 4 years of my life. It's a big, it's the Ivy League of phys ed. So, that's what we call Cortland. But there's a number, from our team, there's a number of great coaches that have come from our teams there, and including Derek Leilana, coaches for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Chad Cassidy, who was an American League head coach and now is the coach at Northwood. So we had a great group. We still stay very tight to this day. And, I'm thankful for that path and ended up there in Cortland.
That's really interesting on the compete that you were talking about. How would you define compete?
Well, I'll tell you how we define to compete in junior hockey is one-on-one drills all the time. Every time Taves got mad at us, he would it was one-on-one full ice, one-on-one out of the corners, and you're just learning, compete, you never give up. You keep battling. You have to get to pucks first. And it's you against one other guy, and it's your will against their will a lot of times, or your smarts against their smarts. So I thought it was great for development at that age, because as a player, you can't move on in the game if you don't have an inherent compete level. So I thought it was great development at that age, and again, thankful to Tabes for that.
So you went to Cortland. You were a leading scorer the last junior senior year. Ended up being top 20 overall in SUNY Cortland history, and inducted to the Red Dragons Hall of Fame. And that's pretty impressive. And then you took a weird way to become coaching. I saw it was like kind of by accident. What happened there?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was by accident, but it was very much, I was a biology major in college. I thought I was done with hockey. I was looking at different grad school programs my senior year at Cortland, and I was fortunate that I was offered a spot at Ohio State to do a PhD that would get paid for on a research assistantship, or a master's degree at the University of Maine. The same thing, a research assistantship to study mercury concentrations in the environment. And so basically your grad school is going to get paid for. And so I went up to Maine. That was my purpose, to go up there and get a graduate degree and go into contaminants in the environment. That's what I was interested in. And I just remember my first month there, I'm out having a soda with some other grad students in biology, and they keep talking about science. And that's when, it just hit me, that moment just hit me like, okay, my passion is in science. Like I'm outside of it. My passion is in science. The only thing I was thinking about was hockey. So I cold called the head coach of the University of Maine program, who was Sean Walsh. And my college coach, Al McCormick, called Sean on my behalf. And Sean agreed to sit down with me. And, I owe my college coach and Sean a big debt of gratitude, because Sean sat down with me for a half hour, found a way for me to be a high school coach at Christmas time. They practiced right after our high school team, and he offered me to come on their staff the next year as a volunteer. And I completed my master's degree while I was up there, but also the year I was the volunteer, we won the national championship. So, a lot of things fell into place. And for the most part, the biggest thing that fell in place is that there was a head coach willing to sit down with the kid that he knew nothing about. So I was really fortunate there.
Yeah, that's awesome. With Coach Walsh, and I've heard, great stories about, helping a lot of people out and all of that. You went to Harvard after that, and then you took a job with Union College as the head coach in 2003. How was your time for the Dutchman up there?
Well, the Dutchman was good. The time at Harvard. So I leave Maine. We win the national championship, and I'll just tell you how, because a lot of people ask this. The reason I got the Harvard job to be an assistant there is because the job paid $12,000 a year with no health insurance. So there was no one else that would take the job. It was such a low paying job, and but it was such a great opportunity. In 4 years, we went to the NCAA tournament, our last 2 or 3 years there, and we won the league. So I got a great experience of building something that had been down and building it into a champion. And then the same basic opportunity came with Union. I was sharing an office with the other assistant when I was at Harvard, and Union called him about the job. And it was a job that, at the time, not a lot of people wanted. And he basically said, no, I'm not really interested in the job. And I was waving my hands across the room at him, just saying, hey, tell him about me. So I'm 29 years old, and I take a job that basically no one else kind of wanted. the first couple of years, they were really on the brink of going back from Division I to Division III. I think Kevin Sneddon deserves some credit because he built a foundation to kind of save the program. So I was able to come in and rally the troops those first couple of years, save the program. But my time at Union, being a head coach at 29 years old in Division I college, not having scholarships, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because you really had to learn to win. Like, you had to learn to build a team. The foundation of my coaching comes from Sean Walsh that year at Maine, and from my experience at Union, the 8 years I was there, of how hard we had to work to develop players, how hard we had to work to develop a group to play as five, and the style we had to play to be successful without scholarships, has really kind of formed me as a coach and what I believe in. And, our last year, we obviously won the league and then played in the NCAA tournament. And so I was told, I was under 3 athletic directors the first 3 years. The second athletic director was an interim athletic director, and he brought me in and he said to me, "I know you can't win here." And I walked out of the office. Like, I was so pissed, because any type of competitor, you don't even think that. So that was the mentality we had to battle through at Union at that time. And from being in a Division III school that they thought they could never even compete, or getting to 500 was an incredible year, to getting them to realize that you can win championships and be in the NCAA tournament. And then obviously Rick Bennett finished the job and won the national championship there.
Yeah, that probably kind of ties in. That was your one-on-one that Coach Tabron was having you do, right? It was game on. Let's compete. Let's have some fun and bring it. So that's a cool story to kind of talk about. So you won Coach of the Year right before you left, or the year before you left, and then again a finalist a year. You went to Providence, which storied history with a lot of great teams, especially in the 80s with Chris Terreri and some of these great teams. How was that transition to Providence College?
It was a jump, because I knew it was going to be a challenge. As much as I love the ECAC, the challenge of Hockey East with Jack Parker and Dick Umili and Jerry York, there's just so much intrigue to that challenge of saying, "Hey, can I win against the big boys? As a coach, can I build something against the big boys?" And took the job over. Providence was 57th out of 60 teams the year before on the pairwise rankings. They had only scored 75 goals the year before. And I'll just, like a normal Division I team is about 100 goals. A real good Division I team is 130 goals. They scored 75 goals, which was 5th lowest in the NCAA, and they graduated 50 of them. So I was inheriting a group that had, we were returning 25 goals, but I loved it. I mean, the guys we had right away, they loved the school, they loved wearing the jersey, and they were competitors, and they were good kids. They were really good kids. So, we found a way to make the playoffs my first year there, and then we were the 7 seed, and we upset the 2 seed. And we get to the league Final Four, which was the first time Providence had been there in like 15 years. So we immediately kind of were able to make an impact. Our second year, we made the big jump of getting to be a program that was over 500, which was, that's a big step of, just getting that over 500. And then our third year there, we got in the NCAA tournament. I think we finished top 4 in the league, made it to the NCAA tournament. Both those years we made it to our league Final Four, and then we upset Quinnipiac the first game and played Union, the team that I had built, in the regional final, and we we're down in that game 2-1 in the third period, and we're really controlling play, and then one of their guys picked one of our guys' pocket and went in alone and scored to ice it 3-1. And then Union kind of walked through the rest of the field. And you look back now and you say, man, you didn't realize, because you're just in this process of building every day of trying to get better, that team was on par to do things, or possibly get to a Frozen Four.
Yeah, that's cool. So we want to talk. I'm going to pull up the presentation right now and talk about your 2015 national championship team and how you built that team. I mean, currently you're sitting at six straight years in the NCAA, which is pretty remarkable to have that to be continued. But I'm going to bring that up right now. Can you see that, Coach?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, okay. I got it. So yeah, I mean, like part of this conversation is to talk about, the difference between building the world junior team and building a college team. And so I thought I'd start with the college route, obviously. And the big difference is you're recruiting your players in college, and you're recruiting your culture. Your culture is going to be based around the guys that you have in your program and your identity of what you want to build and what vision you have as a head coach. And so, our national championship team was a big. We recruited 4 boys in the summer before the summer before I officially was the head coach of our first season. A boy named Ross Maurerman, Stefan Demopoulos. Were both, guys that played on our national championship team. And I inherited Tim Army's first class, and there were some really good kids and good players and good pieces in that class, including Noel Achari and a boy named Shane Luke. But the majority of that team was our first recruiting class, and they were juniors that year. So they came in their freshman years. We win. We get over 500. Their second year, we get to the NCAA tournament, get to the final 8. So this was building for them. But this was our first recruiting class, and we recruited them to our culture, to our identity. And winning a national championship is very rarely like a 1-year thing. It's usually a 2-year thing, 2 or 3 year thing that builds. That guys do have some tough losses along the way, and they build up some of that mental toughness and some of the hurt that pushes them to get to the next level. And but so that's a little bit of the background. The other difference in the college, obviously, is you're doing season-long development. And our national championship team, like that core of the team was with us either 3 or 4. It was either the 3rd or 4th season with us. So we had gotten to develop those guys a lot, gotten them into the roles that we really wanted to see them in, gotten to develop those roles, develop their games as individuals, and also develop them a lot as players, because as I mentioned in the last bolt there, your player development is a large part of making your team better throughout the year. So, and it's one of the biggest mistakes that, I sometimes see, in high school hockey or youth hockey, or sometimes, like, you have to understand half of your practice have to be devoted to making your players better, because if your players don't get better individually, you're cutting off a good portion of your ability for your team to get better. So just to understand that this was something that was building with our group. Next slide, please. Yeah. So it was our 4th year with the program. One thing that not a lot of people know is we had a whole new staff that year, outside of myself and Teresa Feaster, who was our graduate assistant, and Kyle Murphy, who was our director of operations. Every person on our staff was new. We had a new equipment manager, we had a new trainer, and I had 2 new assistant coaches. And fortunately for me, Greg Popovich had just went through the same thing at San Antonio. They lost Game 7 in the NBA Finals, and his whole staff turned over. So I read a lot about Greg Popovich and about that situation going into the year. And it was, I think, the fact that we had a whole new staff took this group and helped push it to another level also. I think the guys that we brought in were Chris Mayotte and Steve Miller, and I think they brought a freshness for the players. And they brought, they helped get us over the hump with the coaching. The team, just so everyone knows, we had one All-American, and that was our goalie. Our goaltender was John Gillies, who was a second or third round pick of Calgary, and he's played some games in the NHL. For my money, he was the best goaltender in college hockey that year. The year before, he was the world junior goaltender for the USA, and he was our difference maker. The team we played in the final had Jack Eichel on BU, and he was their difference maker. But, I always, simulated John's game to a 40 goal score, because he would steal a goal a game for us. And if he's stealing a goal a game, you might be +1 in a lot of situations. So John was, I would categorize John as probably our, quote unquote, our elite player. He was the MVP of the national tournament, and, certainly could raise his game to a very, very high level. Our forward group was a B+. And what I mean by that is, and I still tell our assistants to this day, go get us a bunch of B+ players, because B+ players, to me, every guy was versatile and every guy competed. And, of that group, I think 5 or 6 of those forwards have played in the NHL, including Nola Chari and Mark Jankowski, who you would say, Mark was a first round draft pick, but when we had him, he was a young buck that was getting better and learning his game. And, Brandon Tanev, was a guy that had only scored 39 points in the BC League, in the British Columbia Junior Hockey League, but he kept getting better and better. And that's where I go back to those union days of developing guys. We spent a lot of time developing these groups, but if you have the right player, that B+ player that can compete and that's versatile and that can play heavy and has good puck skills and can skate well and can think the game well, man, you can do a lot with those players. And, the difference in our group that I think made us national champions was that the depth of our players, the depth of our forwards and our defensemen, we could often run down teams. We were deep enough where, it might not be our first line or our second line scored every, but our third line would get it. And so then my next bullet point, our third line was Brandon Tanev, Kevin Rooney, and Steve McParland. Brandon obviously plays for Pittsburgh. Kevin Rooney plays for New Jersey, and Steve McParland has played in the American League and is now playing in Italy. That was our third line, and they were heavy. They could skate extremely well, and they gave us the ability to match that line against any line that we played against. And because they were so tenacious and relentless and heavy, they set a big tone for our team, and they freed up a lot of space for our other forwards. But that line drove us in a lot of ways, and that line got the toughest matchups and freed up, Nick Saraceno and Nola Chari and Mark Jankowski and some other guys to play against opponents' second and third lines. A little known fact also about that team is we might have been ahead of the curve a little bit with the mobile defensemen. We were we only had one defenseman over 6'1", so we were mobile. We had great sticks, but we were really good at breaking pucks out. And I think we used our mobility to defend well. We used our mobility to get up ice in the offense, and it suited our team well. And I think a lot of the game has gone in that direction. So next slide. So a little bit about the season. We were picked number 1 preseason for Hockey East, so the pressure was on us. And it was new. Again, you go into the not one player in our locker room had experienced that, of being picked preseason number 1 and the hype that goes with that and the standard. You're basically going to be the poster in everyone else's locker room for, this is who we got to knock off. This is the standard of the league. So we started with a little bit a rough start, 1-3-1, and it included a us going out to North Dakota, who ended up being in the Final Four that year and getting beat up. We lost 6-1 the first night, and they launched fireworks after they score. And I hadn't been out to North Dakota before, neither had any of our players. And I just remember after the first goal went off, almost ducking on the bench because I didn't know what was going on. And then by the time the sixth goal, by the time they scored the sixth one, I was looking to see what colors the fireworks were. I was so amazed. But we came back the next night with a really good game, carried the play much of the time, and ended up, we tied the game, but we carried the play. We had a power play in overtime. And I thought it was just a great growing moment for our guys. We ended up going on a 13-3 run. But the thing that was plaguing us the most with this team was we were struggling to score. And all of our guys that, had put up really big numbers the year before were hitting posts or missing nets, or it just wasn't going in the net for us. We had one guy that was really hot, Trevor Mongoya, and he seemed to be scoring some big goals for us. But Noel Achari and Ross Maurerman were our two captains, and they did not have a goal the first 13 games. And you could see the pressure mount on the guys. And these are two guys that wanted to have great senior years and both wearing the C, they wanted to carry the team also. And they were playing good hockey. So keeping them on board and keeping them focused on the right things and focused on the process was really big for us. But when we struggled to score, we built a great identity with the team. And the identity was based around us being heavy, us being very good defensively, because we weren't winning games, 4-1, 5-1. We were having to win games 2-1, 1-0. And, the biggest model we were building with the guys is that our defense travels. We knew we could go into any rink in college hockey and stick to what we are and what we trust. And know that it traveled to the rink. We weren't going into a rink counting on one guy just to make a play. We were going into a rink and knowing if we play our game, we trust our game enough that we don't care if it's 0-0 or 1-0. We're going to win the third period and we're going to win this game. And so winning third periods became a big model with us, and also defense travels became a big model with us. And we got on that run and we built this identity that eventually led us to a good run, and we believed in our identity. We knew what we were. We ended up finishing second in the league in our regular season, and the goals came around. I mean, we ended up scoring over 100 goals. But when you're going through these slumps a little bit, as a coach, you're working on the things you need work on. And we worked on our scoring. We worked on our power play. We worked on our scoring. We worked on our power play. We worked on our net front presence. We worked on, getting more volume shooting versus making pretty plays, and really focused on being a heavier offensive hockey team. And I'll tell you in a little bit really how that played off.
What is heavy to you? What makes a team or player heavy? Coach Mike wrote a question in.
For me, heavy is being strong on the puck. Okay. Being heavy is wearing teams down in offense. Being heavy is not being able to, there's a loose puck and, go in a one-on-one, and I just don't get bumped off. But not getting pushed off the net is being heavy. Not getting pushed around areas of the ice, whether it's a face-off, or whether it is the net front, or whether it's the corner play. Basically being strong on the puck and having a great presence around net fronts, and being a team that plays through bodies really hard. So when you play against someone, they know it. Yeah. So we lost the quarterfinals to UNH, and if you look at the scores there, the shots were somewhat lopsided for us in the first two games, but we reverted back to we struggled scoring, and they ended up winning the final game 2-1 in overtime in our rink. I'll just tell you a little story about that. They won, I think, 13 minutes into overtime. Brett Pesce, who plays for Carolina, didn't come off the ice for 13 minutes. That's how good of a college hockey player he was. So, you know, you don't see that at any level in youth hockey but that's how good he was. And, but, you know, after that, it was heartbreaking for our team to get on, you know, to play so well in the second half. And then for us to kind of get back to struggling to score, it was hard for us. But right afterwards, we had a 97% chance to be in the tournament by all the parameters. And it came down to, everything started going against us to get in the NCAA tournament, because you lose early, you're not able to control you don't control your destiny anymore. So we had to rely on some other teams, but everyone that we needed to just play okay, or just they wouldn't. They were losing, and that's what you put yourself into. So we went from being a 97% chance team in to it coming down the final game of conference tournaments, which was Michigan against Minnesota. Michigan wins, we're the last team out. Minnesota wins, we're in. Okay. Now we ended up, I think, 13 in the pairwise, but you got to remember, if a conference tournament champion wins and they're not already in the top 16, they bump teams out. So we fell from 9 to 13, and we had to rely on Minnesota. And thank God Don Lucia and their team got it done. And Minnesota won. It gave our guys a big second life. It was amazing. The next morning, coming to the rink, I mean, we practiced for 2 weeks, and the last couple of practices, the tension was so high that even we were doing small area games and just trying to have fun, and you couldn't get anything done. Guys couldn't catch a pass. They were tight, you know, they wanted it so badly, but they knew they didn't control it. And it was out of our control. So, you felt the tension leave when we got in, and the guys just knew it was second life, and they poured everything they could into their preparation, and we got right back to our identity. We got right back to the drills we were focusing on when we were struggling. We got right back to our game, and we got placed in a region that I thought at the time was probably the hardest region. And Miami had a wagon that year. Miami of Ohio, they had won the NCHC. Rico Blase is an unbelievable coach, unbelievable building a program. And their team, I think this, you know, like, I know they lost in the national championship game, and they had a heck of a team that year, but this might've been one of his best teams. And so they were in our region. They were our first game. Denver, who Jim Montgomery was starting to emerge and bring a program up. They had an unbelievable team that year with 6 or 7 upperclassmen. And Boston College, you know, who was finished third in our league in Hockey East, but they had a very good team also. So I felt there were, in the region, there were 4 teams that could win the national tournament. And a lot of times you go into the national tournament, you know, as a coach, maybe you're saying, all right, I think there's really 8 or 9 teams that really have a shake at this. But, you know, there were 4 of them in our region, and the regional, going back to our struggle, we score 7 goals our first game. We score 4 goals the second game. So we got back to our heavy play. We got back to our relentless game. And Miami was a shootout a little bit. We got up. We were rolling. We were up 4-5-1. Then they pulled their goalie with 10 minutes to go and made a push, made a really tight game. And then we ended up pulling away, I think 7-4. Denver was an unbelievable game. It was 1-1 late, and they took a major penalty. And we were, you know, we got a power play, and our power play was not doing great. We had a couple chances, but, you know, we were off a little bit. So they get a 2-on-1 on the kill, come down and hit the post. And the puck goes out of play afterwards. I called a timeout, brought the guys over, didn't say a word for the first 20 seconds. And then just said, hey, take a deep breath. go back and just execute everything we've worked on. And we ended up scoring a goal 20, 25 seconds later on the power play. Tom Parisi, who all season had petitioned us to be on the power play. And it came out with a huge goal. And that was another big moment that I think was kind of like a near miss, is what I call it. Like, those moments could go either way. That post could go in, and then you're reeling and you lost momentum on the power play. But it didn't. It hit the post, and Johnny made a couple of big saves. Then we move on to Omaha. I just thought that we got a good matchup there. And, like, Omaha had Gensel, and they had a good offensive team, but, they weren't the caliber of Miami and Denver, and we had just seen those teams. So we had a good 4-1 win against Omaha. So we go from only scoring 4 goals in a series to UNH to now scoring 7-4-4. And then we go into the national tournament, the national championship game. And BU was, Dave Quinn did an unbelievable job with that team. Jack Eichel was their star player, but they had a lot of seniors that year. And that's Evan Rodriguez was a senior. They had a really good team. And Eichel had kind of taken their team to a whole nother level. But back when we were struggling and we were 1-3-1 at the beginning of the year, our next game was BU, and we went up to BU after losing home to BU. We went up there and we played a heck of a game. And in the third period, we matched that Rooney, Tanev, McParland line against Eichel. And every time Kevin Rooney would go on the ice, the only thing I'd say to him is, get this draw, get the draw, get the draw. And he did an unbelievable job against Jack Eichel on faceoffs in that game. And we go in the locker room after the win, a good win for us on the road. And the first thing I said to the team was, Kevin, you did an unbelievable job shutting down Jack. And it started with winning those draws. And then, everyone clapped and everyone cheered. But so BU beats a great North Dakota team, and we draw BU, and all the guys on the team started to bump Kevin about Eichel. Like, it was unreal. Like, everyone, and that's the purpose of having an identity and having roles on your team, is that Kevin knew that line was getting Eichel, and he knew, what his job was. So every guy on our team was behind Kevin in that role. And that tells you that we had a group that was committed to winning too. You had 5, we had 26 guys that wanted to win. So they knew our best chance was Kevin doing that. And the only point Jack Eichel had in the national championship game was the time I had Nola Chari out against Eichel. I think every other shift I had Rooney out against him, including the shift that we got the game-winning goal. So the BU game was a great game. They had a good game plan. They were throwing everything they could at John Gillies' feet, and we got off to a good start. Got a goal kind of off a scramble around their net. It was a rush. Guys had good habits, stopped at the net. We got a second puck on the net that looked like an empty net, but we hit the post. It ricochets right to our defenseman that put it in an empty net. So that was big for us getting our confidence. They scored the next 2 goals in the game. One of them, their first goal, they threw from the goal line. They were kind of below the goal line. They threw it to the net. And by anyone's statistics or stature or anything, it was a horrible goal, But John Gillies was so mentally tough that he just wiped it off, So we're down 2-1. John Gillies, they were throwing everything at his feet that they could. I thought the big thing in the game is that they were dominating the neutral zone offense against us. And they were coming with a lot of speed. It wasn't allow our D to get up and dictate things. Our D were often having to protect the middle of the ice instead of getting up and dictating things. So we switched a little bit we switched our neutral zone defense in the third period. It got us on our toes. and we started to we turned the momentum of the game in the third period. We got a bad goal back in the game. We flipped one in from the neutral zone, and that went in their net. And then the momentum just changed of the game completely. The momentum changed in the building. We ended up scoring the next goal to go up and finish the job. And all year, as I went back and, I talked about our identity all year when we went through that and talked about trusting our system and trusting our identity. Our staff talked a lot to the team about knowing that games are going to be close, and we wanted to win the third period, So I think one thing that really helped that team win a national championship was the fact that when we went in between the second and the third period, that team knew exactly what we were going to say. They know what the three things we were going to talk about to win the third period. They had a clear picture of that. And we were able to switch the momentum of the game and win the game against a great BU team. So, it was good. It was culminated a 3 or 4 year buildup, and a very proud moment for us.
Yeah, must be pretty cool. So we're gonna probably do something just a little bit. We got a couple questions in about kind of your building your process for Providence, and then we'll get into some of the international stuff. Is that okay, Coach?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay. So Coach Tom asks, when recruiting the B+ players, what is the first thing you look for?
Okay, three things I would say. I'm not going to say first thing, because I think if you have a player that's one dimensional just in one thing, they're not a B+ player. For us, it's three things. It's their hockey IQ, their compete level, and their skating. Those are the three things. Those are the three biggest things for me in a player that we look for at Providence College. And those are the three things that we look for when we were building the program, from scratch.
And kind of off of that, how many scholarships do you have at Providence?
We have 18. We have 18 scholarships for roughly 26, 27 players. Yeah.
And when you're at Union, how were you able to recruit and without scholarships? What was kind of the tough part about doing that?
The toughest part was finding our niche, and our niche ended up being older players that were captains of team or led their team in scoring. That's what we ended up our niche. And we really hit British Columbia hard. We hit Western Canada and British Columbia hard because we knew we could find those guys in those areas, as well as Toronto. Those were areas that we hit hard once we identified what we were kind of looking for in those players.
And then I have a couple questions about players' confidence and being in slumps. How were you able to manage that and stay positive with some of your players? And what did you do? How did you work on that?
Well, you stay in the process, first of all. You can help them build confidence by showing them positive things and by showing them positive clips and showing guys when the puck was going in the net for them. And that's what we did. We built a lot of tapes for guys about them scoring from the year before. We also showed a lot of NHL film about where goals are scored, because you're trying to, continue for them to do the right things to put themselves in position to score. And a lot of times, getting that first goal coming out of a slump is the one that goes off your butt, or you get a bounce. And so once Ross and Noel scored, they both scored against Northeastern, and they both scored twice in the game. So it was like a switch flipped. And even on the bench, the tension kind of broke with the guys. But back to the question is, you got to keep them in the right habits, but you got to keep them positive, and the other thing that you try to express to those guys during a time where they might not be scoring is, what else are you doing for our team to win? What's your B game? What can you help us with to win games? Because you don't want to feel like a guy's identity is just on scoring, because then they're always, you only score on 10 to 17% of your shots, like you're always going to feel like a failure there. So, make sure they have a B game. How else can they contribute to the game, but also stay in the process of building the habits to getting to scoring?
Yeah, very, very right on. Just keeping that process going and all that. So you're going to be the coach of our U.S. National Junior team this year. You've had a couple of experiences in 2007, winning the bronze, in 2009. Can you walk us through this process of how you're going to build this team and kind of the whole World Junior process?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's something that I've always wanted to aspire to doing. Like, listen, I mean, we went through my background. I was, I didn't start playing until I was 13 and a half. I was a Division III player, like for me, I'm very grateful for USA Hockey to give someone maybe untraditional a chance. And you have to prove yourself, obviously, to get these opportunities. But it's been something that I've been hoping for a long time, and very excited to do it. And I think the first thing that, to focus on is you have to have a great relationship with the general manager. And I do with John Van Beesbrook. We had a call today for 2 hours about evaluating the players. But it all starts there. And I've had, 5 or 6 calls with just he and I talking about philosophy, talking about what we're looking to accomplish, talking about the steps that we're going to accomplish that, talking about COVID-19, how we're going to get through this, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of maybe, the whole world being under the same scenario, and how can we maybe use this type of, what's going on in the world to have a different type of camp or something like that. But the second thing is building a staff, and it's very different. Like when you're building a college staff, we all overlap roles. Like everyone, you have to, you have 3 or 4 people doing all the recruiting, doing all the team building, doing all the development. Like when you're building a World Junior staff, it's much easier to put guys in specific roles. So the guys that were on board were guys that, are going to be under very specific roles, and whether it's power play, penalty kill, goaltending, face-offs, 6-on-5, 5-on-6, just strictly video, things like that, scouting. You can really, it's a short tournament. And the other big thing is, like, when you're recruiting for college, there's a big development part of it. You're looking at guys and saying, this is their potential. They might get there their junior year, they might get there their sophomore year, they might get there their senior year, but there's a build and there's a development every day. When you're coaching the World Junior, it's to win, and it's a short tournament. So your staff and everything you're evaluating is far less on development and far less on winning. So you're trying to create that successful identity, and what I mean by that is getting guys in roles, getting guys to play as a group of 5, getting guys that might play 20 minutes on their college team, that they're coming in, and are they going to be able to accept an 8-minute role? Are they going to be to be the best penalty killer on the team? Are they going to accept being the best face-off guy when maybe on their college or their major junior team, they're the best face-off, best power play, best penalty kill guy? And I think that's a big part of the success. How quickly you can get your group, from maybe 50 guys to 23 players. 23 is your allowable roster size, and get them into those roles, is something that I'm very cognizant on, is that the longer we can spend time together as a team, the quicker I can get guys practicing their roles and developing those roles. And maybe that gives us an edge of being a little bit better. And you typically have a summer evaluation in 10 days to build pre-tournament. And we've broken I break the tournament into phases. You have your pre-tournament, you have your pool play, and then you have your crossover play. So you got to grow and develop each step of those. I put each twice in the PowerPoint, so I have to say it twice, but each step there, to continue to grow throughout the tournament, and to be playing your best. I'm trying to go a little quick here, Dave, because I know you wanted to keep it at an hour, and I saw I was at 4:12 because I can be long-winded. So one of the big things with this tournament is that one of my mottos, you got to play your best. when it matters the most. And that's, working back from a gold medal game and saying, how are we going to play our best when it matters most? And so that's kind of in my head, in my model, where I want to have an identity that and a structure that the team can rely on. And what I mean, like, you can't go into these short tournaments. Jeff Blashill told me something that's really stuck with me. Jeff Blashill's the coach of the Red Wings, and he coaches the World Championship team 2 or 3 times. And he told me, Nate, you run out of practice time. And so your structure has to be something that is easy, the guys can pick up on, that is something hopefully they've been familiar with, they've played before. But you have to have an identity and a structure that the guys can really rely on and stress. And when you get into these big games, just like a national championship game or just like an NCAA tournament game, you have to have an identity that you stick to and a structure that, we all have confidence in, that if we play our game, we trust our game, we can do it, and we can outlast people. One of the other things, I want to be a team that dictates. That's who I am. I like heavy players. I like guys press and pace. I like guys in each other's faces. I want to be a team that dictates, not a team that sits back. Fortunately for us, the tournament is on an NHL sheet, and it's in Edmonton. I want to be a team that is 23 strong, meaning that I want every player to have an important role. I don't want any guys to be lost on our bench. I want, there's no guys that what they're bringing to the team isn't significant, that you can dress 22 players, and I plan on using 22 players, but I want to be 23 strong. Your 23 guy being your third goaltender. And I think my pattern has always been winning by depth, and I think I'd like to do that too with the depth of our talent pool in our country, and making sure some parameters that I think just to be successful team in the tournament, we have to be bottom 2 in penalty minutes. The international game is called much tighter than the college game, and we have to be disciplined. Because specialty teams, and you're in one game scenario, specialty teams can win or lose your games. And if you're putting your opponent, back to my 2007 experience, we were beating Canada 1-0, but we took 6 penalties in the game, and on their 6th power play, they scored. And the game wound up in 1-1 overtime, and then 1-1 after overtime went to a shootout, and we lost the game in a shootout and lost to Canada via shootout, and then Canada beat Russia 5-1 in the final. So we had a heck of a team, but we went to the box too much in that game. So that's always stuck with me. And being top 3 in specialty teams, that goes back to having great assistants in those positions. Top 3 in goalie stats. And why I didn't put goalie, I put goalie stats, because goalie stats are a lot about also what type of chances and shots you're giving up. So, but those 3 things are all. You look at the teams that have won the gold, they've been in these categories. So those are easy, parameters that we can look at and measure ourselves by, so that we're peaking at the crossover. When we get to that crossover game, hopefully we do get to that crossover game, but we're peaking at that time. Next slide. So last slide here, guys, is that where we're at right now. We had a 2-hour call today, but I'm focused on the summer evaluation. I haven't even moved my head to the winter evaluation yet. The summer evaluation, and where we're at is, we're starting to talk about the player pool and evaluate the individuals. But I also understand that summer hockey can be summer hockey too. And, and what the guys do in the fall, may have every bit of an impact on them, their evaluation as the summer does. And a great example is that as a guy like Shane Pinto, who played a huge role in the team last year, and he just kept getting better and better and better through the fall. And what for me, the parameters, hockey IQ, like I talked about, the character, their ability. And what I mean by ability, that comes down to their skating. Character is compete for me also, but character and role is something that, you go back to. A lot of these guys are going to be the best players on their team, or key players on their team. And their college team and a major junior team, and the character they have to play as a group of five, to join the identity, to make it a team first event, to win the gold, and the role that they're going to play is something that they'll be evaluated on very heavily. And that some of that will come in individual meetings with myself and the player. Some of it will come, with the evaluation process. Some of it will come in the fall. And the other things that we're really focused on right now is, the staff chemistry, getting us all together, getting us on the same page, and then measuring what are going to be the strengths of the group. Every world junior team for the U.S. has different strengths. Bobby Moscow's team 3-4 years ago that won a gold. They were just, boy, their stick skill, and their talent was just off the chart. He did a terrific job with that group. But you're going to have strengths of the group. We have to measure that. I want to set the identity of the team and the goals for the team, at that time. And that's where you get your first real impression with the team. And that's what we'll be focused on doing. And the other big thing of getting the staff on is having verbiage. When you bring a staff from all across the country, as well as players from all across the country, we have to be very, very careful on us all using the same language to the players. And what I've asked our staff to do, and what I want to do is, I want to make sure that the verbiage we're using is all the same, but we're also showing video clips of that. And I think it's something that every coach in youth hockey, you can't come back to have a kid come back to the bench and you say something and the kid not know what it means, the player, the boy or the girl. So everyone's got to be on the same page, and that's your verbiage and that's your language. And the more coaches can use a phrase, getting above the puck. Well, this is what we mean by getting above the puck. Digging in for a face-off, net front presence. What is that? It could mean 5 different things to 5 different people. Owning the lane to the puck. Those can mean all different things. And so we want to make sure we're showing video clips of the verbiage we're going to use to the guys. And so they can come back to the bench, and even though that we're new coaches and we got a short time to get to know each other, they have a very clear picture of what we're speaking about, and our communication is excellent. So those are the things that we're, that's kind of the phase that I'm in now, and it's a lot different. I'll go back to it. It's very different than building a college team. A short tournament play is completely different than building a college team, but it's also very exciting. It's also, another example is, look, when you're building a college team throughout the year, you're building all areas of the game. Like, all right, you're going to build your D zone. We got to be great at D zone. Then we're going to be great at O zone. Then we're going to be great in the neutral zone. You're building all these aspects of your game. When you get to these short tournaments, I mentioned the structure's we got to be good structurally, but the structure's usually pretty simple, something that the guys can get pretty quickly. But you're really picking 3 or 4 areas of your game that you want to be better than everyone else at. And whether that's your transition back or your net play, or you dictating, those are all things that, I've kind of identified for our staff 4 or 5 things that these are the things that I want to be really good at, because you're not going to be good at everything. You just, if you spend all your time trying to be good at everything in these short tournaments, I think you're going to end up being mediocre all across the board and not good enough to win.
Yeah, Coach Verity, who coaches Tucson Roadrunners and has coached a couple over international. He was talking about team identity and having the same verbiage and all of that in a webinar a couple of weeks ago. So it's such an important part and easy. So we know that you have 2 sons that play youth hockey, right? Yeah. How does your experience within youth hockey? You coach them. I know you're on the ice a little bit with them. How does it differ, and how is it the same to maybe your teams at Providence and this international?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been great, because as a coach, you learn so much on how the kids learn things, you know. And I know USA Hockey's done an unbelievable job with this ADM, and it's really made things a lot easier for coaches, you know, that may not have had a hockey background, or you know, maybe are learning how to coach. It's been terrific. So the station models and the small area games are something that I think you can really see kids develop at. My biggest takeaways from youth hockey has been how to break down the skills that the kids get. And I just talk about the stride and the puck handling, and the two things that, if I could talk to youth hockey coaches about, you know, and I have a son that's going to enter a peewee, and I have another son that will be last year might. Yeah, I have three boys, two of the three play. And the two things, the pace of your practice means so much. The pace at what kids do things at. Don't feel bad about pushing kids out of their pace, and don't feel bad about you know, kids moving and doing things at higher paces. I've found are just as important as the exact perfect technique. You know, when you run most practices in youth hockey are 50 minutes because they get a 60-minute sheet and 10 of it's cutting. Take a big consideration in what's the pace that you're doing things at. And to get to that pace, don't feel that you can't do the same drills over and over again. You know, like as coaches, sometimes you think you got to run, you know, like 6 different passing drills. Well, if your kids are able to understand one passing drill, then it's not bad to go with that passing drill every Monday and Wednesday, you know, until you can get them at the pace that they can play and move their feet and have their head up and get to another level. So I think, you know, that my biggest 2 takeaways is pace is extremely important, and repetition and drills is something that I think is extremely valuable in youth hockey, and get, you know, finding your 10 drills and sticking with them, and you know, so the kids can master those drills before they move on.
And there's so many things that you can do within a certain drill or a game that you could focus on. You know, you could have the same 2-on-2 small area game that maybe one time you're focusing all about, you know, good passes or however many shots or getting net front. There's different things that you could focus on the same drill. You don't have to be crazy, you know, different. And, you know, a lot of the kids they're only playing 2 times a week. So it might be repetitive for you as an adult, but if they're having fun, they're being challenged, like you're saying, about that pace. You know, you don't want to make it too easy. You don't want to make it too tough, but having the right challenge there and making sure they're trying hard. On the youth hockey side, do you what would be some ways that you can build teamwork within your the youth hockey? What you've done at Providence? Is there anything kind of team building drills that you have used in youth hockey that can help some of our youth hockey coaches?
I'm going to be 100% honest on this. And the best team builder is equal ice time at those age groups from what I've been around. And hey, look, coaches and organizations, they get caught up in winning. And it's amazing how I've seen youth coaches, they feel their identity is based on winning and losing, just like a college coach is. Like I've come out of rinks and I've seen youth coaches so dejected on losing. And, you know, meanwhile, you know, the kids come out of the locker room like, hey, all right, where are we going? McDonald's, ice cream? What are we doing? You know, it's like, and, you know, my son played in a summer youth tournament 3 years ago, and the kids left the game crying in a summer tournament. And I was so taken aback about, you know, identity. And so I'll tell you one thing, equal ice time is one of the best team builders. You know why? Because when people know up front there's equal ice time until the last 2 minutes of the game, the parents all get along in the stands. And when the parents get along in the stands, the kids get along on the ice also. And I give one of my son's coaches a lot of credit this year, in the fact that he stuck true to equal ice time all year. And I can't tell you how good the chemistry of the parents was in the stands, um, and how the growth of some of the kids. My son ended up in the they ended up in a 3-on-3 playoff, 3-on-3 overtime in their league semifinal game that went to a shootout. And they could have easily won the 3-on-3 if they would have kept rolling the same 6 guys. But the coach rolled everyone through the 3-on-3. A coach can leave the rink knowing he did the right thing. And I never saw that coach dejected about winning or losing, because every one of his kids got better throughout the year. And, if I'm a youth coach, and I guess how I measure youth coaches a lot, I don't measure them on wins and losses. I measure them, did my son get better in 3 or 4 areas throughout the year? And I think if coaches took that, if they understood their identity is just as much about making these kids better in 3 or 4 areas through a year as their identity is about winning and losing, I think they'd have a different approach. But I also am a big believer in, and I might get scolded for this, but when the parents and the stands all get along, the kids get along really well too in the team building. So, there's no jealousy, because everyone knows going in what the parameters are.
Yeah, and we've had Dr. Amanda Visick on, and she talked about what is fun, and positive team dynamics was the second highest thing. And positive team dynamics is, equal ice time, making sure that everybody enjoys going to the rink, everybody enjoys being out there, and that starts from the parents and creating that environment, and that's super important. And like, how would you suggest maybe a young coach do that with some of the parents? Sometimes you have some young coaches that are pretty young and the parents are a little bit older. How would that young coach help those parents and help himself or herself coach?
Well, I think the first thing is setting the parameters right at the beginning of the year, and understanding that, we're not going to shorten the bench, unless it's the last 2 minutes of the game in a tournament or in a championship game or something like that, and getting those parameters across really clearly to the group, as well as the players. And then the second part, I would say, is identifying with each parent, these are 3 things that I want your son to get better at throughout the year. This is my focus. This is part of my focus. If a parent sees that someone cares about my son also individually and trying to work on their development individually, and they're invested in my son, and it's not all about wins and losses, I think there's probably going to be a heck of a lot greater buy-in from a parent, throughout a game and throughout a season. And then, hey, it's hard. Like I give a lot of credit to these coaches that volunteer their time, because their time is, they're spending a lot of time. And that's another great thing about the ADM is they designed a lot of practices for people. But I would say that if they can identify with the parents and the players, if they can, spend 5 minutes on an email, identifying 3 areas. And so maybe these drills, I'm going to push your son in these 3 areas. And this is what I'm looking for in these 3 areas. And then, at Christmas time, measure them again in that area. And then at the end of the year, and it could be as simple as, look, I want, I'll give you one thing I worked on with one of my son's teams, is that there were 2 or 3 kids at the beginning of the year, or I would say mid-season in the year, that before the puck came, they could catch a pass and know the pressure that was coming, and either protect the puck or make a quick move to relieve the pressure. Well, I started looking around. I was like, man, there's only 2 kids that can do that. So I started coming up with drills to try to teach the whole group on, you got to think about what you're doing before you get that puck. And we got to get your hands and your passing skills and to a place that when you get a puck, I got to be able to make a quick move to evade pressure or buy myself time or get around a guy. So it started with a coach being 5 feet away from a kid, passing the puck to a kid, and then putting pressure. And the coaches were moving half speed. We were moving like literally like slow as like molasses on some of these kids, but they have to get it, right? And then we moved up to groups of 2 where the kids would pass, and then they would move. And then we moved up to a drill where you have 2 lines, and we started them about 20 feet apart, and it was continuous passing. This guy's got to pass it, and then he pressures right after he passes. This guy's got to make a quick move, evade him, passes to this side, and then he's the next guy that pressures, right? So then we got to the guy that pressures has to have his stick on the ice. Now you're trying to get your stick on the puck, and you're working on other things. And then what happens, by the end of the year, you're trying to move the lines closer and closer. So that time is less and less. But these are the things that coaches can identify, work on. And like, how hard are those drills? They're not hard, but let's repeat our drills. Let's do them with pace. What's pace? Pressure. Pressure provides pace. A guy pressuring forward or a guy chasing you from behind when you're doing a drill with the puck or skating, that gets us at a higher pace. And so those are, I guess, were some of the things that I think can help buy in there.
That was great. That was unbelievable. That was really spot on. And I love like having that pressure. So I have 2 more questions, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm good. You told me it was going to be an hour, and I don't want to get you in trouble with USA Hockey. Next thing you know, Dave Caruso fired from USA Hockey because he had Coach Leaman on the horn, So yeah.
Can I get that $12,000 job at Providence with you?
It was at Harvard, the richest school in the country with I remember, I'll give you a quick story on that. My first time recruiting British Columbia at Harvard, you're a young assistant. You don't know what you're doing, right? So I didn't get a hotel room because I thought I would save the budget money. So I stayed the night in my car at the ferry landing. And I remember calling our other assistant coach the next day. He goes, "Where'd you stay?" I'm like, I stayed at the ferry landing. I stayed in the car. And he went up and down me 2 times sideways. "You never do that again. You get a room. You're not putting yourself in danger." It was great, but yeah, $12,000, the richest school in the world. I love Harvard. Don't get me wrong, but so.
Coach Jason, he coaches in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give youth coaches to develop compete in hockey IQ?
One-on-one battles, one-on-one, 2-on-2. You're always going to get compete with when it's even man situations, but I really like one-on-one because there's one puck and there's 2 guys, and the other thing I've found is that one-on-ones in the youth, my might and my soon to be Pee-wee, like no kid loves corners in youth hockey, right? It's you have to build up that confidence with the kids as a coach of getting first to the puck and understanding that there might be a little guy that bumps you or incidental contact, those types of things. But so the one-on-one, one-on-one races, one-on-one, a net turn, one-on-one in anything small area, one-on-one. Now 2-on-2, you're going to get to like one-on-one is all about 2 things. One guy's got the puck and he's thinking, how do I get the puck, and turn that into offense, get a shot on goal or evade the pressure. The guy off the puck is just thinking my defense on the puck. Where's my body position? Where's my stick position? When you move up to 2-on-2, you got these 2. This guy's got the puck. This guy doesn't have the puck. They're still thinking the same things, but the 2 guys off the puck are thinking completely different things. How do I get open? How do I support? Am I seeing the guy's numbers or am I seeing the guy's crest? The guy off the puck is thinking, how do I keep my body between the net while I support my partner? Are my eyes always on the puck? You do one-on-one, 2-on-2. You can learn so much of the game. It's not about breakouts. It's not about forechecks. You learn those 2. You learn 2-on-2 hockey up until Pee-wee. You can learn so much. You can learn so much about the game. But back to compete. one-on-ones, small areas, 2-on-2s, learning to never give up, learning to play to the whistle, chasing guys from behind, that my feet are never going to stop. I'm going to keep working. A never give up mentality, I would say, within your drills.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point with those one-on-ones, 2-on-2s. We talk about the 4 roles of hockey. And if, the people you have, role 1 is the person with the puck. Role 2 is everybody else on their team trying to get open support. Role 3 is defense at the puck. And role 4 is everybody else trying to protect the other people that are trying to get open. So that's interesting. So last question, and this is what I've been asking all our other guests. What kind of advice would you give a young coach, young person, or a young version of yourself right now as they're starting their coaching journey?
I guess from my perspective, the thing is that, any background can help become a great coach. You know what I mean? Like, so don't, keep striving to get better, keep learning, get around as many people as possible to help you learn. Understand that the game is much different, from when we grew up playing it. The game is so much different now. But, that if you have a passion for it, follow your passion, because, like, I still love biology. I'm a huge fisherman, like that's what drove me, towards biology, is my love and my passion for fishing. But, it still goes back to my life changed when I had the first time I went out with the other biology students on a Friday night, sitting around a table and them talking biology, and I realized what my passion was. And so follow your passion. And if your passion's hockey, keep learning, keep building, because there's a path for everyone, and there's no reason you can't do it, I guess.
That's awesome advice. Really appreciate it. So I just want to remind everybody, for next week, we are on youtube.com/USA Hockey. We're going to go on the main page. So if you're watching on YouTube Live, we're moving over to the USA main page. And for that, I'll put on the links on at USA Hockey Coach, and also the ADM Facebook page. Next week, we got a good round of guests. We have Dr. Stewart, who's head of the Mayo Clinic and chief medical officer for USA Hockey. He's at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, so a little bit earlier. On Wednesday, we have Dr. Charles Popkin talking about early specialization and the role in ice hockey. Timing is everything, at 3:30. Thursday, we have Jeremy Swayman. So a goalie you played against a couple of times, right, Coach? With University of Maine. And we're bringing on his development team, and what it takes to have a Mike Richter Award winner, and how do you develop goalies. And then on Friday, really excited to have on our 1980 men's golden goalies, our 2018 women's golden goalies, and then our 2014/2018 sled golden goalies. So Jim Craig and company will all be on, and we'll have a good Q&A session with them, just talking shop about what it takes to win gold medals, and be part of the team, maybe if you were the starter or not the starter, supporting each other throughout. So we'll have a great talk with some very, very high-end goalies who won gold at the international level. So again, Coach Leaman, thank you very, very much appreciated. Do you have anything you want to say before you leave?
I'm glad Jeremy Swayman signed out of Maine. I'll just give you, we played them first game of the season, and what ended up being our last game. First game, we beat them 7-0. Last game was maybe our best game in the second half of the season. And it was one of the best individual, we ended up losing 1-0. It was one of the best individual performances I've ever seen in college hockey. Jeremy Swayman was unstoppable. I think he stopped 40 plus shots. I think the shots were like 45-20, and he was unbelievable in the game. And so kudos to him for signing a contract. You guys listen to him for sure, because I think he's got a really bright future.
Okay, thanks again for everybody watching. Thank you, Coach Leaman. And we are going to be on USA Hockey, the main YouTube page next week. So have a good weekend. We want to thank our first responders, the people in healthcare, people at the grocery store, and keeping us going. So be safe, everybody, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Coach.
Okay.